How are you doing, sir?
I'm great. Thank you.
I'm glad to finally get you here. I appreciate it. Thanks for your time. So we've known each other a little over a year now, and I've gotten to know you, but there's still so much I don't know about you. So instead of us talking privately, I kind of wanted to get your story because I've heard bits and pieces of it, and I was like, man, this would be a really great time to sit down and share with everyone not only how you got to where you are now, but all these things you guys are doing in the community. So if you want to jump right into it, I mean, tell me kind of how you got just going.
Okay.
Generally from your kid, from a childhood moving up, I guess.
Yeah. I grew up, I guess, in basic middle America, maybe low middle America. Both parents worked. They cared about me. I wasn't neglected or anything like that. My dad traveled a lot. He wasn't around a lot. But basically, I grew up in a good area, South Shreveport. I had some big challenges as a kid. At the time, I didn't know I had challenges. As a child, you think you're normal.
Yeah.
But you start hearing stories and you have memories and you start realizing that a lot of the behavioral issues that I had as a child parlayed into more challenges as I got older, which turned into some pretty significant problems. For some reason, I was very violent as a child. I'd get frustrated very easily. Today they know you have ADD and they know you have dyslexia and they know all these things. Well, back then, those terms weren't invented yet. So I was just a hyperactive kid that got in a lot of trouble. I would have explosive fits of rage and temper tantrums and everything else.
What age was this?
Oh gosh, preschool.
Okay, so early age.
I can think back. Before first grade, I was already in trouble for biting. So it's like, I was always in trouble for something. And I remember going into first grade and becoming a challenge enough where my father actually had to go to the back of the room and sit in the classroom just to see if I could be controlled. They sent me to child psychiatrists and tried to load me up with things, and none of that seemed to work. Very violent, hitting kids with chairs, rulers. There wasn't a time growing up that I remember a year of my life where I wasn't suspended or sent home from school.
Were you an only child, or do you have other siblings?
I was an older child.
Older.
I was the oldest.
Okay,
I have a younger sister that was 7 years behind me.
Gotcha.
But no, it just, I thought I was normal being kicked out of school 2 or 3 times a year. And I was very proud that my father was in the back of the room to see me. I thought I was special. I didn't realize how special I was. Later, as I got into third grade, I realized that I wasn't picking up things. I wasn't able to read. I would learn words, but I couldn't make sentences out of them. And if I tried to make a sentence and into paragraphs, I'd be exhausted by the time I got finished. I couldn't tell you anything I just read. So there was no comprehension in anything I could read. I couldn't seem to catch on to math. I started having all these learning difficulties. I was in special ed classes, so to speak. If there was a small, short bus, I would have been on it. And I ended up failing the third grade, repeating it. They ended up passing me after the second round of third grade, but I never could catch up. So growing up in adolescence and being asked to read publicly or something like that was horrifying. It was beyond horrifying. I would be just humiliated by something like that. And so I look at a lot of kids today, and I have a lot of empathy for children who are left behind for whatever reason and struggle being able to read and struggle being able to grow academically. By the time I got into high school, what you do is you get angry when people want you to play a board game. You find some reason not to do it. And if they try to pressure you, get more angry. And so you stop feeling good about yourself. And the only way you feel, we males, we're not that complicated. There's only a few ways that we feel good about ourselves. I mean, how do we do with the girls? And there's one, which that was okay. But but being able to excel at something academically or professionally, it wasn't there for me. And so I resulted in forcing people to respect me, and consequently became more and more violent the older I got. That turned into drinking young. I believe I was actually an alcoholic at 16. I remember drinking before going to school in the morning. I knew where I could buy alcohol even at 15, 16 years old.
Was it something to suppress emotions, or was it something that you just thought was cool at the time? Or
I don't remember.
Yeah.
I just remember that to me it was more of a masking thing.
Okay.
It's like, if you don't want to deal with life, so you suppress it.
Gotcha,
you
yeah.
mask it. That parlayed into drugs, 19, 20. Smoking pot early. But then I graduated to cocaine and other things, and became a real problem. If you could swallow it or put it in your mouth, I would do it. Mix it with alcohol. It was a pretty bad deal.
And you were at that age, so that's in your early 20s?
Yeah, it was my late teens and early 20s.
And then did you complete high school?
I graduated at 19 with a low D average, and back then they had outcome-based education, which means I guess if you were willing to stay long enough, eventually they didn't want to look at you anymore, so they gave you a diploma. I was intelligent, I was smart, I was articulate in a lot of ways, but so a lot of people really did not know my secret, and that is that I really couldn't read. I learned by hearing, I learned by sight, I learned by repetition of doing things, and I was very competitive in nature. I always wanted to be the best at whatever I was at, or I didn't want to do it. And I was really good at whatever I put my hands to do. But using the drugs, doing these things, first thing happens, you're using. The next thing that happens is, well, if I sell some of this, or I deal some of this, then I can get my stuff cheaper, or I get my stuff free, and that parlayed into criminal behavior. So by the time I was 23, I was a convicted felon for distribution of drugs and marijuana, and that parlayed into a death spiral for me, that by the time I was 25, I had lost down to about 125 pounds, and it was just not salvageable. At 25, I remember, people say, well, what challenged you to change? And when I was facing jail time, there was a African-American gentleman who was a bishop in the Church of God in Christ, that a friend of mine was videoing his telecast for him through the free public channel at the Cablevision place. And I would hang out with them and watch as they did this. And it's the first time I'd really been around somebody that I really believed what he was saying. And he would always be kind to me, even though I was obviously different in a lot of ways. But I remember when I was going through a pre-sentencing situation to determine whether I was going to go to prison, I had to go to a place to pee in a cup 3 times a week to make sure I was clean, and all that kind of stuff, all that kind of accountability, and go through counseling and all that. I had a fit of rage and did some pretty terrible things, and violently to somebody, and while they were trying to determine whether I was fit for society, I pulled some stunt like that, and it looked like I was going to do prison time. And in desperation, I went up to the place where I was getting counseling, and he happened to be the director of that place. Even though he wasn't my counselor, he was a director, and he knew me, and he opened up and let me in. And it was the first time that I remember that somebody prayed for me in a meaningful way, and where I sensed something happen. Now, I didn't know if I believed, but I believed he believed.
Gotcha, yeah.
And by some miracle, I didn't go to prison. So, God answered that prayer. And as life went on, I continued to use drugs. I continued, just the addiction just pretty much dominated my life at that point. And finally, one day I came to the place where I didn't want to live anymore. And I said, I wasn't afraid of death. I had faced it a few times, powder burns on the face. I had been in a lot of very intense situations in that life. And I locked myself in a small room with a .357 Magnum and was going to end my life. And the thought came to me, what if there's a God? And at that point, I was contemplating pulling the trigger. And I thought, well, if there's a God, I might, I don't even pretend to believe that I belong in heaven or I belong to be with him. I knew that I was not worthy of that by a long shot. But I felt like I better check and make sure. And so I spoke to God as simply as I knew how. And God, I don't know if you're real. Some say you are, some say you aren't. Some say that Jesus was your son. Some say he wasn't. I don't know. But I want to know. And if you're real and you're good and all these things that people say about Christianity's real and Jesus died for me, what I've been doing hadn't been working. And, if you're real, I need you to reveal yourself to me. Because if you don't, then I don't want to waste my time in this world. And so if you're real, I need you and I need you now. And it was like somebody turned on a light switch or something. It was like suddenly I had this revelation, the reality that there was a God that loved me. And it was so overwhelming because I was at the point of suicide to joy in a millisecond. And I got up from there and I knew there was a God. I knew he loved me. He revealed himself to me in a way I can't even describe. But I knew he was there. And I was sobered up, went home and started dumping out my drugs, pouring out my alcohol, doing what I believe Christians should not do. And I said, well, because I'm taught Christians don't do those things. So I started immediately trying to work my way into a better place. And there was definitely a life change, a heart change, but I still was bound by addiction that continued to pester me for the next year and a half.
Were you just like, would you stop and then start back, or like what did that look like?
I'd try to willpower this thing. And you do good for a season, and then you fall off the wagon.
What age was this by this time?
I was 25.
Okay.
I was 25, working on 26, going through that process. And then in 1987, I was 27, and I was not ashamed to tell people that I was a Christ follower. But, I found myself at times on bar stools somewhere, slurring, telling people how Jesus saved me. And I'd get upset with them because they would laugh at me.
Yeah.
Because it was very real to me. But I was still bound. And in 1987, I had a power encounter in my home when all my family was out of town. I was alone in my house, and God picked that time to get my attention. And basically, since he left me, since he left the room. And I had never said Lord and him not show up, even in that state. It was never a time that I was not even if I wasn't where I should be, and even if I wasn't behaving like I should be, every time I cried out to him, he would always respond. I could sense his presence. And I started crying out to him, and there was nothing. And at that moment, I remember now, I couldn't read, so I didn't have a lot of the word in me. I had what people would preach to me, that kind of stuff. And I'd fallen away from the church and was just kind of backsliding back to the old life. Not the hard stuff, but was still, drinking heavy and smoking pot and things like that. And it was like God was jerking my chain. It's like he'd had enough of that. And so I started playing Let's Make a Deal because I was a good salesman.
What were you doing for
money?
For money at that time, yeah.
Yeah, I had taken a job starving to death in Orlando, Florida for a year. A guy that I knew in the garment industry, knew I'd had a changed life, and knew that I couldn't make money like I used to because, after coming to Christ, I couldn't make my money being an outlaw. I couldn't make my money being criminal, doing mischief things. I was using, but I was trying to perpetuate that in others. I was trying to do better.
Yeah.
I'd go to church and things like that, but it was always a battle. I finally came to the place in desperation that I was crying, I was boo-hooing, I was begging God to take me back. I realized that, he, no matter what I said, he wasn't buying what I was selling. And God, if you'll take me back, I'll just, I'll quit smoking, I'll quit toking, I'll quit cussing, I'll quit lusting, I'll behave, I'll be a better Christian, I'll do all these things. And he just wasn't buying what I was selling. And I guess he'd gotten his fill, and that was it. I thought for sure, now I'm going to hell. I've already crossed that line of no coming back, and didn't have any dogma in me or anything like that from a faith-based perspective. But I felt like I had finally pushed him too far. And this went on all day into the evening. That night I went upstairs and I dug in a closet and I found a Bible that I had bought. Even though I couldn't read, I had a Bible. And I could read one word at a time. I couldn't make sentences. Like I said, I could recognize words and I would read that word, but it would take me a while to get through it. And I opened it up to the crucifixion, and I read about Jesus dying on the cross and what he went through and all these things. And all of a sudden I had like this revelation. I saw myself, I believe, the way God saw me. And the prodigal son in Luke talks about while he was in the pig pen, that he came to himself. I guess that's what I did. I came to myself, and I started seeing myself as I was. Mm-hmm. And after everything that God had done for me, after saving me and revealing himself to me and loving me, and me not taking my life, and me knowing that I was his, I just continued to live in that same pig pen that I was in, and I began to see myself, I think, the way he saw me. And so I remember the last thing I prayed for, I went to sleep that night, God, I don't deserve heaven, I deserve hell, and I believe that's where I was going. And I said, but God, I'm sure sorry. I said, after everything you've done for me and after what you went through for me, I treated all your sacrifice as though it was of little value, to where I would just go back to it. And I said, tomorrow, God, when I wake up, I'm going to serve you to the best of my ability. And if I go to hell, that's fine, that's what I deserve, but I'm going to go to hell serving you. Unconditional surrender, passed out. Remember waking up with my face on the onion skin of the Bible, peeled it off my face, and first thought that came to my mind was the last words I prayed. I'm going to serve you the best of my ability. And I thought, yep, that's what I'm going to do. Went downstairs, still God was nowhere to be found. Had my coffee pot waiting on me next to my Marlboro Red cigarettes, which I don't think a cigarette ever sent anybody to hell, but that represented everything to me. It was an addiction. It was something that controlled me, and it represented the cocaine. It represented everything I put in my mouth, everything I smoked, and I said, I'm not going to do this. I started willpowering that thing again, and I realized real quick, I'm going to lose. And when I realized that I was going to fail, and I was so angry about it because I meant what I said last night. I meant it this morning, and I'm not going to make it 5 minutes, and I'm already fighting with everything with him, and not to pick up my Marlboro Red cigarettes. I said, what kind of lousy loser am I? And then I got to realizing, in all my days of national smokeouts and all that I've been able to do, and stopped smoking for 2 or 3 days, either because I didn't have the money or because I didn't have it. I survived. I controlled that. Suddenly, it seemed more intense than that. It seemed like I had every demon in hell on my back trying to get me to pick up those cigarettes. And I began to war with that. And then I realized that I'm not warring with cigarettes. I'm warring with something much more powerful than that. And I just kind of blew up in my kitchen. I blew up on the devil. I had quite a vocabulary back then, and I used every word in it as I threw those things in the trash can and hurled it, and I cussed that devil with everything within me. And I tell people I think it was as holy as communion, because it was targeted.
Yeah.
It was targeted at my Lord's enemy, and I cussed that devil with everything within me, and I threw him in the trash. And when I turned my back on that trash can, that's when it happened. At that moment, it was like the light switch hit again, and I was free. And the noise stopped, and the desire stopped, and it never came back again. And I've never desired a drink or a smoke or use since that day. That was 1987. I was 27 years old, and I'm 65 today. And you know, a lot of people, my friends and people that I know I work with that struggle with addiction, you know, I know they go through the accountability steps and they do these things, and that's important. I do believe in that. For whatever reason, God chose to deliver me, and you know, you know, I didn't think that was possible, that I could not desire it, to the point where I tell people, you can pile it up 10 feet high, and I have that, leave me alone with it. I have no interest in it. I just know that if I ever made the mistake of picking it up again, I believe that it would come rushing back with spades.
Yeah.
And I know that. So that's why I continue to walk free in that.
And so what did your life start doing after that? So where did that lead?
It was almost immediately.
Yeah.
You know, almost immediately. You know, I started being faithful in my giving, even though I didn't have much to give.
At this time, did you have a family? Were you married?
I had a family. I had a wife and 2 children to feed, and I was starving to death. I pulled 2 teeth that year.
So when all this was going on, you had a family at the time, too?
I got a family at the time. My wife at the time, she was an addict too.
Yeah.
Still had battles until this day. She battles at times.
Got you.
But she's a great person. But we divorced some years later. But the challenge I had at that time was I was making just bum wages. You know, with all my past, you know, I wasn't employable for any amount of money. I was in Florida, Louisiana at that time. You couldn't buy a job in 1987. The oil crunch.
That's right after the oil crash, yeah.
Oil crash, and God began to give me dreams and visions. He told me to go back to Shreveport, where I screwed up as a kid. I said, God, I mean, you know, why can't I just stay here in Florida? Nobody knows my trashy past, and I like it here, and you know, and you can't get a job there. And I started coming up with all these reasons why I shouldn't go, but God was very persistent that I needed to go back to where I failed. And face it. And so by the time I got back to Shreveport, I was basically homeless. Moved into a back room of my mother's house with a wife and 2 kids, and that was not a very pleasant situation. Didn't have a car, so I had to borrow a vehicle. I had $100 when I was done, and started a business. God told me to start with a $100 bill, and bought $30 worth of business cards. Back then they were $30. They're probably less than that now. But $30 worth of business cards. I got a P.O. box because I didn't have a mailing address, and I had a answering service because I didn't have a phone number. And I started my first direct mail shopper in 1987, and called the Big Banana Paper.
So
Southwest Shreveport. Yeah.
Tell me what that, because some people may not know what that is, especially if there's anyone who wasn't, you know,
at that generation.
Yeah, that generation. But yeah, walk me through what that looks like.
What that
from a business perspective.
Yeah, from that looked like, it was an advertising print media that would compete with the likes of newspapers and shoppers and that kind of stuff. People would buy advertisement, and I would publish this publication. It would be like a thrifty nickel in a mailbox today.
Yeah.
And it was nice. It was full color and all that kind of stuff. I was a graphic artist by trade. I could do that. Very talented that way. I'd sell during the day, and then I'd build my ads at night on a kitchen table. Ink washes, illustrations, that kind of stuff, the old school way. And then I'd prepare the publication for print, and I would collect half my money up front from my clients. That would pay for the printing, and then I got the samples, and I'd go around and hand them out, and I'd collect the balance, and I'd use that for postage, and I mailed 50,000 homes monthly for 3 consecutive months, and cash flowed it with no money, no credit, no business understanding, no formal education. And then about the time I got thinking I might actually survive this, I felt impressed to stop and take a job, and that was kind of odd to me because it didn't make sense to me. Took a job with another company. It started the exact same week that I did, and they were a shared mail company. They were direct mail, but they had inserts, and you've been seeing like grocery inserts in your mailbox in Shreveport, Bossier ever since. And I took over that business and grew it considerably.
What was the time span there from 27?
That was 27 to 30.
Okay, so within 3 years.
In 3 years, we grew it considerably. I healed up financially. Was able to own a home, able to own a car, had my kids in private school. God continued to challenge me in my giving. It was something that was always a big part of my life. God would speak to me about something, and I would just do it, even if I didn't have it. I just do whatever He said. Reckless abandonment, you could call it. But every time it always worked out, and I never starved, I never went without, and I kept increasing in my life. I don't tell people that because I think there's a lot of misrepresentation and manipulation of people to give by TV evangelists and other things. But I believe that though it's truth, but once it's manipulated, you lose the purpose of it and it loses its power.
Yeah.
And so, God spoke to me to do something, and I obeyed. And I never asked for wealth. I never asked for riches. I never asked for fame. I never asked for any of those things. I just wanted to be able to feed my family. I wanted to be successful at whatever He called me to do. And that was all I ever prayed for until success started coming, and it scared me a bit because last time I was around money and I had all this access to money and I had all these things. I did some pretty foolish things with it. It'd go up my nose or it would go some other way, and I was kind of intimidated by success. My prayer then was, God, just don't let me be overtaken by it. My prayer was I did not want to go back to my old life. And if it ever got between me and God, I asked Him to take it away from me because He was more important to me than the money and the stuff. And He honored that prayer. And I grew little by little. One day you wake up, and you've had 28 consecutive growth years in your company. You've expanded to across the nation. Your markets from New York to Pennsylvania to Virginia to from Alabama, Georgia, not Alabama, but for sure Mississippi, parts of Mississippi, Shreveport, Louisiana, Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico. A variety of places around the country, and I parlayed it into a very sizable company, and became an innovator of an industry that publicly traded companies would seek after me because they couldn't figure out how to create products that sold, and we did that at scale to the point where then we had contracts with publicly traded companies that were outsourcing their technology and their innovations to us because we created things that made tons of money for our clients. So therefore, we were given the exclusives to manufacture. And that's what kind of summed up my life until today. In fact, this is the year 65 that I'm selling my last company, and I'm retiring from the business world. But I had 28 consecutive growth years in business without acquisition, just organic growth. Cash floated on our cash flowed, and we didn't go out and borrow a bunch of money.
Right.
The only time we borrowed money is when I was forced to get in the production business, and I bought the Morrison-Dixon building on Uri Drive, a 150,000-foot facility, and had to fill it with machinery. It was millions of dollars had to be invested at that point. The banker would say, well, let's finance that for 10, 12 years. I said, no, we'll do 5, and then I paid it off in 3. So, we were always debt adverse. We to this day, I'm very debt adverse, and I've been very successful. And along the way, interesting enough, God would bring into my life opportunities to make a difference. I had a very firm opinion about abortion. It burned in me for years. It bothered me, because I began to see the unborn as a living soul, and there was no talking me out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And people don't all agree with me, but one thing that I've said to people who didn't agree with me on the life issue was, what I had explained to a lady that signed our first lease for the Architects Crisis Pregnancy Center. We opened it on Uri Drive 30 plus years ago. And she said, well, it's quite controversial what you're wanting to do here. I said, well, some people think it is, and some people say it is. She goes, well, I want you to know I'm pro-choice. And I said, well, I'm not going to call her by name. She's a sweet lady. But I asked her, I said, well, every day in Shreveport, Bossier City, there are people ladies that are young women that find themselves in a crisis. I mean, they're pregnant. They may be without a husband. They may be without family to help them. They may be fearful of what it's going to do to their life and their future, having this burden on them. And it's very real, and it's horrifying, and they're alone. And a lot of people went to a place called Hope around the corner up there on Kings Highway to deal with it. Many of them would violate themselves and violate their core beliefs and do these things and live with the burden and the pain of that for the rest of their lives. And I told her, I said, don't you want them to have a choice?
Fair point.
And she said, I've never thought of it that way before. So she said, you signed the lease, and I did. We signed the lease, and we that's where the Architects Crisis Pregnancy Center got started. God telling me right there on that, showed me the building, and that's what we did, and helped put the board in place, underwrote it with my partner for the next 7 years until it didn't need us anymore. And then we gradually let go, and we faded off and ended up in Mexico and doing a work in Mexico, established a work among the trash heaps in Reynosa, Mexico. Did that for 10 years.
What does that look like? Because I think a lot of people don't even know that's a thing.
Yeah, I had an office in McAllen, Harlingen, Brownsville. I had offices across the Fruited Plains, and I would go down there, and I had a lady that worked for me, Ruth Marquez, and just a fabulous person. She, great Christian lady, was telling me about a work that her and her husband and one of their associate pastors in their church was doing. They were going over to those who were homeless, living in the garbage heaps, women, children, and just making makeshift structures out of cardboard boxes or pallets, or digging through the trash for something they could recycle, or picking through the food to see what was edible still in the garbage heaps. And I said, she said, well, they've gotten so many of them that they're having to meet in one spot because they'd go by and check on them, bring clothes and food. It got where it's too difficult, so they started meeting in one location. I said, well, it sounds to me like they're starting a church. Goes, oh, no, it's not a church, Mike. They're just going over there and they're just praying with people and worshiping and teaching Bible study. And I said, sounds like you've kind of formed a church out there in them trash heaps. Oh, no. I said, well, I want to see this. So I went. And when I went, I don't know how to explain it. I went there, and the smells of humanity and the dead animals and the mountains of trash and garbage, and seeing little ones picking through it and living there, not in school.
Where in Mexico was this?
Reynosa, right over the border,
okay.
right there, south of McAllen. It was, in fact, it was what ended up being a church that we ended up having a 5-acre compound. Was leaning up against the dam of the Rio Grande, so we were literally I was a stone's throw from the U.S. to see mass poverty like that, and to see the hopelessness and the lack of opportunity for people. It's just, I couldn't get it out of my mind. So it's just, all I could do was read my Bible and pray and cry for a week, and then finally I just surrendered to it. I said, so I started spending a lot of time in Reynosa, building houses, coming up with floor plans, building these small homes. And then it became a challenge, because as we built more and more of these homes, then there became to be disgruntlement, because everybody kept thinking, well, I'm next. And I realized at that point they needed something much more than just their physical needs met. They needed a pastor. They needed a church. And so we purchased a facility that it was a walled-in area, about 5 acres, and we purchased it, got into a spitting contest with the cartels over it, not knowing even the danger of that. I'd be out there and they'd drive up on me, and they were black SUVs, won't know what I was doing, this gringo over here walking through this area, And I'd say I'm here for the iglesia, and they just left me alone. But when I started, the prostitution area was about 2 blocks away from where we were, so you could hear the music at night and you could hear the partying and the carrying on behind those walls. And they wanted to expand that operation to include this 5-acre compound because it had a 3-story building on it, and it had a big warehouse, and we were converting to a church and sanctuary and stuff like that. And they were really wanting it, and we really wanted it, and so we outbid them, and we got it. And and I look back now and I'm like, well, what an idiot. It's like, you don't even know what you're doing. It's like, but it worked out, and now there's a thriving ministry there today. Hasn't needed me in 13 years. 13 years ago, God moved me to focus on Uganda, Africa. And
what started that? What piqued your interest there?
Well, my previous pastor, I was in the Assemblies of God, and he reached out to me and said, Mike, I really, he and another evangelist that was from Uganda were going to go that way, and he said, you ought to come and hang out with us. I said, I hadn't hung out with him in a while. I kind of missed him, so we went to Uganda, and we went into Uganda and went from orphanage to orphanage in different areas of need to try to determine, what God would speak to us, and we really knew that widows and orphans was a big thing there. After the AIDS epidemic, there was such a massive amount of orphans. Many orphans were dying of AIDS. It was a terrible time in Uganda. Nobody made money. There was no economy. There was just peasants and some farmers and people selling trinkets where they could on the side of a road to people who don't have money. So it was really a desperate situation, a massive workforce, a beautiful country, 3 growing seasons a year. They have what could be arguable the largest lake in the world, and Victoria Lake, and it was a source of the Nile, and it went all the way to Egypt. Went all the way up into the northern part of Africa, and and in that, we began to get more and more connected to people. But there's a great need for water. Nobody had water, no clean water. Water is everywhere. It rains all the time. It's 3 growing seasons. It's on the equator, tropical paradise, no water, no clean water. The water they were drinking was coming out of ditches that animals were standing in, and so forth. And so, we went to a place. I'm not going to name the village because I don't want to draw too much attention. But it was a Muslim community. You've seen a lot of people in Christendom have seen the African map, and they see the red at the top, and it stops. There's a line somewhere around the middle of Uganda, and everything north is Islamic, and everything below is pretty much controlled by Christianity. And we stepped over that line. And at the time that we came in there, Muammar Gaddafi owned a piece of property that we ended up owning. When he took a bullet, I was able to purchase it. 5-acre compound. It became a compound. It wasn't anything but bush at the time, but we purchased it and tamed it and developed a compound there in a point of ministry to the community. We approached it as humanitarian work. The water they had one borehole. They call it a borehole, which we call a well. They had one borehole for 20,000 people. To draw water out of, which is insane. And it would go dry early in the day, and so they're back to the ditches. And they would walk 5, 6, 7 miles one way with jerry cans to get water. You'd see ladies with 2 6-gallon jerry cans, one in each hand and one on their head, walking for miles. Incredible. You talk about a productivity killer. And being it was a Muslim village, many of these women were sharing a husband with many wives. Nobody has an education. There's no free education in Uganda. They say there is, it's government, but it's not. By the time they're through paying fees and doing all these things to try to get, and the places that are falling apart, the ones I've seen aren't fit for habitation. So long story short, over the last 10 years, we have been drilling wells. We have been winning the hearts of the communities by caring about their physical needs. We now have a church there. We have children's church where we may have a couple hundred kids that show up on Sunday. And we're growing a generation of young people now that are adults that are now, in the beginning we used Western missionaries. Now we have indigenous people. And that was the ultimate goal. It's something that everybody wants to get, but it's hard to get to in a culture that's so corrupt. I mean, everybody's on the take. And police, government, everything. And it's very difficult for anybody to get ahead. So,
do you have any pushback there? What did that look like?
People were asking me about that. I mean, you're in a Muslim village, and you've got jihadists going all over the place. You got all these things happening. Again, you're talking about illiteracy is a big part of their world. Nobody can read. So, fortunately or unfortunately, the lack of being able to read mixed with being in a culture that live and let live, they're not radicalized where they hate Christians. They don't see Christians as somebody to hate on. They see them as competitors, but there's a lot of Christian people that are kind of pacifist too in their faith, and so it's sort of like one of them situations, but I tell people that I feel safer sleeping on bare ground in the middle of that Muslim community than I would in town that's 20 minutes away behind walls and with AK-47s protecting me.
Yeah.
I fear for the individual that would try to harm me in that village. I mean, they literally asked the previous missionaries we had on post there if they would consider being the chairman of the village, which basically taking over the chief type position as Christians in a Muslim village, whites and Mzungus. That's just unheard of. And we said no, that's not what we do. So. But we've started educating kids. We got involved with a school that was struggling. Some Canadians had started that was an elementary school, and it has grown 500-600 students strong, elementary school kids. We at the time we were probably 50% or more of their resources. The mandate. It's called The Mandate. If anybody ever wants to look it up, it's look for it, themandate.com or themandate.org, and you can learn more about what we do. But the funds that we were donating, it's got a board of directors that basically everybody puts in, nobody takes out. There's no payroll for people like me there. We give, we don't take, and we funded the building out of about half that school, and we continue to support. Probably at this point, they've got us weaned off to probably 30% of their necessary funds. We built another school from scratch year before last for high school students in another village. It's for 250 students, dormitories, buildings, everything, wells, land purchase. We got all that done for a fraction of what it would take to get something like that done around here.
Yeah.
It's almost scary to think, for $250,000 we were able to build a school to occupy 250 students, including dormitories, showers, school buildings, new construction, purchase land, dig wells, and to take care of, and then we still underwrite the whole 250 students.
Yeah.
On a monthly basis, but it's been quite rewarding. These kids are, they're watching them grow, watching them get educated, having an opportunity, hope for chance is a big deal. Interesting enough, you go there and you see a kid in elementary school. You walk into a classroom, not of 20 or 30, but of 50, in an area that we would say, man, you'd have a hard time teaching 25. They'd have 50 students in that room, and you could walk in and hear a pin drop. And we're talking about first, second, third graders. Hear a pin drop. And you walk in, they stand to their feet out of respect when you walk in the room. and then the soft-spoken principal or teacher says, "We have a guest today," and they'd introduce me or something like that, and they would say, "Welcome to, primary to sec 2 and such school in Harmony," like a choir, and you are most welcome. And I'm sitting there thinking, look at the discipline of this. And the reality is, children there would skip food before they skip school. Where here it's contrasted, you have to truancy and you have to figure out how to make kids go to school.
Yeah,
it's really craziness.
We're too privileged.
We're very privileged.
Yeah, I mean, if you take something like that and they have absolutely nothing to look up to.
And what's crazy is when you see them, all you see is smiles. All you see is happy individuals who think they're on top of the world.
Yeah.
And rich. And they are. I mean, they are. It's all relevant, but they are, And so, because they get to go to school.
Yeah.
Their parents are very grateful because there's a chance, maybe just a chance, that their child could grow up to be something different than a peasant, that's trying to live from day to day, moment to moment. That if they get sick, they don't die. It's pretty amazing, very gratifying. We're presently in the middle of another school build out. There was a school that was in poor condition that we're basically going to have to take down to the ground and start over again. But we're doing another elementary school that's close to our high school, and it'll be finished up over the next few months, and it should be able to take on 300 or so elementary school kids, and we're excited about that. And we're drilling wells in a new village or two that we hadn't before. So, you go in ministering to the needs of people. It's very difficult to tell people how much Jesus loves them. It's very difficult to tell them how much you love them. And yet you get in your car and you drive away. That doesn't sit very deep. But when you sacrifice and they see you there and they see you sacrificing and they have a sponsor for a child to be able to go to school and they know that somebody all the way around the world cares enough about them that they might actually be able to go to school, $38 a month, it covers medical, it covers everything. So, the mandate, we're always needing child sponsors. So if somebody has a heart for children, what I'll say is every penny goes to the need. All admin expenses are paid for by the board of directors. We pay for that out of our own pocket. No donations from any donor go to anything outside of what it was specified to do. 100% of that money hits pay dirt, and we make that go very, very far. So from a stewardship perspective, I'd put us against anybody on the earth, because we only put money in, we don't take money out.
Yeah, I think that's you're instilling hope. You go back to saying being able to go somewhere, like you said, and preach the gospel or whatever it is, but then also do things to make these people realize that
change their lives.
Yes, exactly. Extremely, in an extreme manner. You're taking someone who would never had lucky to make it past 10 years old in some cases, as we talked about, or how early are those girls getting pregnant?
Well, here's the thing that was amazing to me. I got an interview with a young woman that grew up under our leadership in ministry. She's now in her 30s, early 30s, and she is in her 5th year of university college level. She's like a nurse practitioner for OBGYN, so to speak. She says they call us small doctors because they can prescribe and they can take care of the preventative things. The mortality rate at childbirth is astronomical, but some of the things that we offer cut that in half. We have mama kits that people can pay $10 for, and that mama kit literally cuts the mortality rate in half for the unborn and the mother being sick with sanitary supplies. We have a ministry called Hope for Girls. In that world, women are half a step above a cow in value. They have no rights. They have no say. In our prison ministry, we find people in prison sometimes because their husband said, you need to be in prison. We had one situation where an 80-something-year-old woman, her husband dies, and one of the sons from another wife said, "She killed my father. She's in prison till she dies."
Huh.
No day in court, no rights read. They pick her up and they put her in there, and that's where she stays till she dies. And when you look at a world like that, and what Harriet talked about in that video, I think at some point we'll probably have that video on our website. But if you hear that interview, you'll hear her talk about young women and their plight and their situation. They're sold basically at 15 for what their father can get for them, which is, she said 500. And when you hear the word 500, she means 500,000 shillings, which sounds like a whole lot of money. But 500,000 shillings equates to $185.
They're selling their kids.
They're selling their daughter at 15 to a man to be another wife, to bear him children, to be his slave for $185. She has no chance of education. She has no chance for making her own money. She has no future other than bearing children and serving this master until she dies. And that's the only hope she has. And so what we've done is we've started a vocational training school where one of our indigenous young people learned seamstress and is now training ladies in the village on seamstress school and tailoring, to where they can come in, learn to operate sewing machines that are foot pedal, that they can use even where they don't have electricity. And they learn to sew, and they learn to sew with excellence. And after they graduate, we provide them with their own sewing machine, and we provide them with materials and things that they could use to begin to sew clothing and that they can sell and make money. And it's almost like microfinancing for impoverished women. And for them to be able to make a living and to make money, especially at a young age, their father is saying, "Wait a minute, I don't necessarily want to sell this girl." That's one thing that happens, or they're not forced to prostitute themselves or whatever.
Yeah.
Young girls in high school and elementary school, if they're able to go to school, it's not very much money. But in that culture, when they reach a age of maturity where they start having menstrual cycles and that kind of stuff, the girls usually have to drop out of school because they're considered unclean. They don't have pads. They don't have the feminine products that we have here. And so they'll go and they'll sit and they'll squat in a little mud shack somewhere until it passes, but they've missed all that school. And at some point they're encouraged to either enter the sex trade or find a sugar daddy that will pay for their pads so they can continue their education. And it's actually encouraged there. It's incredible. Even among the Muslim community and the Christian community there, it's almost seen as acceptable behavior because the need is so desperate. What we've done is we've created a program called Hope for Girls, which is an outreach ministry where we provide reusable sanitary pads and purses and waterproof breathable things, to where they can have this that will last them for a year or two if they take care of them, to where they don't have to quit school, and we give that to them at no charge. And they also get sex education and get taught by ladies that can explain to them what's happening to their body, because they don't even know till it hits them. And so we've given away hundreds and hundreds of these things, and for $10, our sewing school makes some of them, which provides income for them and training for them, but it also provides necessary for the young women and teenagers that are in school.
Yeah, so you have multiple different sections there where you're collecting money for drilling wells.
Yes.
Ministry.
Yes.
Orphans
and
widows,
or children's education.
Yes,
yeah.
and then also
we have widows and orphans we take care of. We
right.
have a church there now, and whatever they give is applied to that. But then we also embellish it to where they can go out and minister to widows and orphans in the community. Our administrative director there is a young woman that was 14 years old when I met her. It was one of our first friends, was not in school. Her father had abandoned them because they had become Christians, and they were left alone. A single mom with 7 children, alone in a very, very hostile world, without any support, without anything. And we came along about that time. And she went on to school, she went on to college, and she was the first person in her village to ever even go to high school. 20,000 people, no one had ever been to high school.
That's crazy.
And now her and her sisters and stuff are the only people that went to high school, but they're also the only people that ever graduated from college. And Harriet's going to be probably 7 years of higher education before she's done. And she plans to come back to the village and open up a clinic for the community she grew up in. And she said in the beginning they would laugh because they were Christians, and all they had to do was denounce God, and their father would continue to support them. And to have the strength and the courage in a very much a masculine world for women and children to say, we will not deny Christ in a Muslim village. All they got to do is submit, and if they don't, then they're left to starve. And they chose starvation. It never happened. And I just think that's an impressive testimony.
Yeah, it really is. It's a lot. There's a lot. And the fact that, how long has it been now?
We've been there for, 12, 13 years.
Yeah, and creating opportunities, like I said, out of nothing.
Out of nothing, yeah.
And then it just continues to snowball.
It snowballs
in a good direction.
Yes, yeah. Absolutely. We're needing more. As I get older and as I retire from the business world, I'm not necessarily in the wealth creation business anymore. It's easy to sling money around when you're making a lot of money.
Yeah.
So now we're having to be wiser and more prudent. Not that we weren't wise and prudent before, but we have to be more thoughtful because we want to make sure that the work that we've begun never stops.
Yeah.
And that we have some. Been very fortunate. We've had some new board members that have come on the last year or two that have a lot of means to do a lot of things and been faithful to that. And but we want people to really benefit from this great blessing, to be able to know that 100% of your gift literally changes the destiny of a generations. I mean, it's like it's so little matters so much. I mean, you're looking at like a carpenter, journeyman carpenter, 25 million shillings, 25,000 shillings, 25,000 shillings a week.
Yeah.
Okay. So you got 25,000 times, or divided, I should say, by, is $9.59
a week.
Imagine a journeyman carpenter making $9.59 a week. When anywhere on the world a chicken costs you $10, even there.
What are they eating?
Mostly what they grow.
Okay.
And pick. Trees. We have a lot of fruit trees on our property, and people always climbing. We try to keep the kids from picking. They're so hungry sometimes they'll climb up a mango tree, and they're all green, and they know they're green, but they're so hungry they'll pick it, and they'll bite it, and they'll throw it down. They'll grab another one, pick it, and bite it until there's nothing left. Where if they could just be patient another few weeks, there'll be mangoes for everybody. It's very, very challenging to teach that kind of patience. We teach farming techniques, fertilizer techniques. We don't come in with tractors and big machinery to take care of, create a dependent culture. What we do is we create a situation where we teach them how to maximize what they can do.
Yeah.
And they can grow what they can do. What fertilizers will get them the best yield. We do have like bulls, big ox. That they'll put a yoke on and they'll plow with, and none of them can afford an ox, so we have community ox.
Okay.
That basically they'll come and they'll take the ox, and they'll have to be responsible to feed and take care of the ox while they're plowing, and then when they come back they pay a little something towards that. Well, that little something gets put in a reserve that takes care of the next ox when this ox dies, and so it can be perpetuated.
Yeah, it's in the best interest for all of them to keep the ox alive and in good health.
Yeah, it's kind of, we create co-op environments, that type of thing. to where it makes a difference. Even now, the chairman of the village says, they say that our original village is the richest village in all Uganda, because there's not 20 families that don't have their own well, in groupings, which was unheard of. And so people from other villages are beginning to raid our village because they need water. So, but you're talking about $5,500 for a well that will pay out for thousands of people for generations. Came across again a child that was dying of a parasite because of unclean water. Happens every day. It saves lives. It changes lives. And you talk about goodwill. When we don't just come in and dig a well, we come in and love the people, and we don't just leave them, we stay. We stay because we want them to have everything we have to offer, and that is Christ. And we believe that's our calling. When the Muslims ask us, why do you come? We tell them, well, we're here because we're Christians, and we believe God created us to be a blessing to the earth. And they seem okay with it, and they love us, and we see conversions. So we're excited about that.
Yeah, just what I've seen, just being a part of it on this side, what I've seen, it's insane, and what you're going to continue to do. And you guys, at some point, you're creating sustainability. It's just taking a while.
Yeah.
You have to get the society where it needs to be, and then, but those people become educated and then come back, and then eventually, just like your other ventures, I'm sure you could step away and you know what I mean?
Yeah, we've been considering, going into the well drilling business there, because there's a lot of NGOs, a lot of, Franklin Grahams of the world, they go out there and they pay to have these wells drilled and all that kind of stuff. Well, if we can drill it and they pay us, then that means we could take that. It creates jobs, number one, and that means we have well drilling capabilities, whether we have money or not.
Yeah,
to where we can go into very desperate situations and drill. So, if people ever want to say, hey, I want to donate to water, or you can specify, I want to buy a drill. There may be somebody out there that has that kind of money, to where we can have a portable drill on wheels that we can drag around and drill wells. Hey, you're changing destinies of hundreds and thousands of people.
Yeah, it's insane. This is crazy. And so most of these villages have that amount of people in them? Is it like 5 to 20?
10, 20,000.
Got you.
Yeah.
Got you.
Yeah.
Well, circling back to what you guys are doing here local, I kind of want to shed light on that too. Kind of give me a little breakdown of that.
Well, a few years ago, coming off of 2020, we remember in Shreveport particularly the amount of violence that was happening. It had been a problem for years, but the COVID lockdown and the lack of going to school and all the challenges it exasperated that challenge. Suddenly the violence kicked up to fever pitch. We'd never seen that many people murdered in the streets of Shreveport. Shreveport as a whole is a smaller city today than it was 20 years ago. So you have an infrastructure that was designed for more humans than what we have, but at the same time, we're still building new homes. We're expanding into new neighborhoods in south part of Shreveport and north part of Shreveport. A lot of people are escaping some of the challenges, or they think they are, by moving to Bossier or North Bossier or Benton or North DeSoto or that kind of stuff, and I don't knock it. It is what it is. So a lot of the growth of the area has been going into other areas other than Shreveport. Well, that's one thing. Then you have a situation so you have a lot of blight. The blight situation is becoming overwhelming because the amount of vacant housing you've noticed in Shreveport over the last year or two, apartment complexes that are becoming vacant, that they're solid, they're structurally sound, they're actually pretty good, but some out of town firm just finally decided we're just going to walk away from this thing. And they don't pay the water bills, they don't do these things, and they just leave them, and then they become havens for crack houses and everything else and vandalism. And so the people that were living in them are moving from those dangerous environments, the apartment complexes there, to single family dwellings in neighborhoods that are also riddled with blight. Now, this is my opinion. This is my conception. Not to get political, but what happens is, so you have them moving into neighborhoods like Queensboro, Cedar Grove. You have them moving into Allendale, the bottoms, Martin Luther King areas. You have more towns. You have areas that are already violent, that are already have a lot of blight in them. The blight might be 10, 15%. Another 10% is on the verge. It's predominantly rental markets. You have homeowners, but they're elderly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you have these neighborhoods that are becoming more and more decrepit, depraved of what they need to be sustained, and so you have more renters. More renters among poor people equates to transitory living. Living in a home like I did from first grade through high school, it's not there for these kids. These kids are moving every 3 months, every 6 months, because they live from paycheck to paycheck, and mama lost her job, or they had this thing set them back and they're evicted, or they have to move into their auntie's house, or they're moving into their grandmother's house, or something of that nature. Mostly single parent families. And so being in that kind of condition and moving around, causes children who are on the fringe, or who may be not catching on quite as quick, maybe because of the movement and the movement around and all these kinds of things. The kids aren't stupid. They just, many of them were like me. Now they call it dyslexia. Now they call it attention deficit. Now they call it all these things. Where then there really wasn't a remedy for any of these things. There are remedies now. There are things where kids can have dyslexia and go on and get a college degree. They just learn differently. And these kids, by the time they're discovered by a principal, in fact, there was a principal of a school, elementary school, that was shut down last year. Before they shut down, while they were marked to be shut down, we had a resource rally in the community where SCU, we formed something called Shreveport Citizens United. Myself and a total of 5 CEOs, we came together. Nobody's self-made, but all of us know what it is to come from nothing. We have a large advisory board of professionals and people who have sensitivities to the blight of our city, because we need to understand it better. And we come together and we find solutions, not that are politically motivated, not that are gotchas, or we're not against anybody. What we are is we're for everybody, and we want, whether you're a district attorney, whether you're the chief of police or the sheriff or the mayor, or whether you're a city councilman or parish commissioner, we want you to be very, very successful. And in that success, we know that you're there because you want to serve the public and you want to make a difference in your community. And many of these communities are hurting. I mean, the blight is creating all kinds of problems. The moving is creating all kinds of issues. So affordable housing is a real problem. And then the moving around. By the time a principal he was telling me, Mike, he said the roster that I have in the fall that starts the school year does not even resemble the same roster in the spring.
Yeah.
He said these children, they're not there. By the time we understand that little Joey has a learning disability or is behind and we're trying to get him caught up, we get ready to help him and he disappears. We don't know what happened to him. We'd like to think, well, they landed another school and they already know what the problem is with little Joey and they pick up from there, but I don't believe that's the case. Now, we'll address the school board later. We're kind of taking one challenge on at a time. But I do believe that there needs to be a mechanism in place in Caddo Parish that recognizes if a children is behind, we know he's behind, he needs to be tested, we need to know what the problem is. And if he disappears, there needs to be a list that he falls on. And so as soon as a child shows up at a new school, they look to see if he's on that list.
Yeah.
Little Joey, he has now been. If not, we now know we have a truancy problem, which we already know we have. We have hundreds, maybe thousands of kids out there that aren't in school that need to be in school. And if we think we have a violence problem today, you let these first, second, third, fourth, fifth graders, sixth graders stop going to school and let them hit that adolescence where they're 13, 14, 15, and let that testosterone hit their bodies. and them not be able to read, them not have an education, them not to be employable, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to do what you and I do.
Yeah.
They're going to get in trouble.
Yeah.
And so what we do is we're trying to address solutions to those kind of problems in SCU. When we first started, we thought about, we look at a problem, and in the beginning, I tell people, I thought the problem was crime and violence. I thought it was a homicide rate. And that if people would come to us and say, Mike, you're doing these things around the world, what can you do for Shreveport? And I hadn't done anything in Shreveport since the Crisis Pregnancy Center. But when I look at that, I thought, they're people and they're dying. These kids are dying every day on our streets, And so we put together a board, and we came together and we said, okay, in the beginning, like I said, I thought the problem was violence and crime. I tell people now, if I spoke to you in 2021, forget everything I said to you.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have a clue.
Yeah.
I thought the problem was violence and crime. I thought it was a demographic. I thought it was a section of the city. I thought it was a location problem. But I learned real quick that's not the problem. The problem is an environmental problem. You take any child, I don't care if you're white, black, purple, or green, and you put them in a certain environment and leave them in there, let them cook and pull them out, you're going to come out with the same cake. You're going to come out with a very dysfunctional young male who is frustrated and wants respect and needs it desperately and will do what's required to get it. Okay? And he's going to make money however he's going to make money. And he's going to sire as many children as he can, just like every other male in the world. And without a father in the home, you add to that, a single parent family that doesn't have two parents to bounce accountability off of. It makes it even more desperate. And then you take poverty and you put it in a situation where there's no hope and no opportunity for hope. And, now you've got a real problem. So what we're doing is we're seeing violence and we're looking at the blight and we're looking at all these things as a symptom of a much bigger problem. And so when we look at the problem, we think, well, how do we solve it? And like CEOs, all of us successful, every one of us have been very successful CEOs, we solve problems for a living every day. We're not bureaucrats, we're not politicians, no knock to my friends that are.
Yeah.
But we approach things differently. We say, this is a problem, how do we fix it? Well, we see affordable housing as a problem. That would save some of that migration. We see mentorship programs for kids that may only have one parent in the home. That might help solve a problem. We see education for young men who maybe have learning disabilities where they can't read and they have problems with math. And they can't get funding for trade schools because they can't get a high school equivalency. So they have no chance for even for vocational training. Okay? We see that as a problem. We also see that as an opportunity because for every 5 tradesmen in the world right now that are retiring, only 2 re-enter.
Yeah.
And some of the highest paid jobs that you're going to find in Shreveport-Bossier right now are going to be plumbers, electricians. It's going to be people who can remodel, people who can fix things and do things and serve the community. The community needs it. There's a void there. And we're not talking about jobs, McDonald's wages. We're talking about $25, $35 an hour jobs. And so our plan is, and we're open, by the way, we've got our nonprofit. It's HB, Handyman Vocational Training. We're very excited about it. It's one of my big personal passions. We've already hired an instructor. We found an instructor. We've hired the instructor that will start. We're going to start with 16 students, 8 in the morning, 8 in the afternoon. We're collaborating with people who are already waist deep into the problem. Volunteers for Youth Justice is one of the most amazing nonprofits you'll find in Caddo Parish and Bossier Parish. These are the people that when a child misbehaves in school, or if they get arrested for having a pot or maybe having a weapon or something that gets them kicked out of school, or they get arrested for something, they get dropped off with Volunteers for Youth Justice. They're outsourced by the juvenile justice system for Caddo Parish and the school boards for both Caddo and Bossier to deal with these problem kids. And immediately they try to work with these kids, counsel them, identify what the needs are, try to bring some change, because the trajectory of their life is heading down the wrong path. Before Steve Prater retired, I was sitting with Steve and he was sharing with us. He said, Mike, in all that crime and violence, my best friend and my co-chair and one of the founders of our organization, Dr. Jerome Cox, he and I were sitting there and we're talking to him. And he said, it's like 300 and something kids, are creating 80% of the chaos. Yeah. I said, what, 300 people are creating all this chaos? He goes, yeah, and they're between the ages of 12 and 17. You could have knocked me over with a feather. You got 12 to 17-year-olds that are demoralizing our city, that are causing people to want to flee and move. You got that are killing other kids on the streets. We're talking about children. We're not talking about rational adult behavior. An adult criminal doesn't drive down, down a street in the city of Shreveport, spraying machine gun fire, hitting bystanders along the way in broad daylight on a Sunday afternoon. That's a child. Yeah. That's a child's behavior. Criminal wants to hurt you. He's just going to walk up to you, pop a cap in you, and walk off, and you're the only one that got paid. But this madness that we're seeing is
that's a good perspective, and that's something good to highlight, because most people don't even think of it that way, but that's exactly what's going on.
That's what's going on. So we're hopeful that the first thing that happens, they're going to get a mentor, a life coach. When they agree, Volunteers for Youth Justice is going to pre-screen and send referrals to us, because they know which one of these kids are most likely to want to change and make the most of that opportunity, so we're not wasting our ammo there. And then as we prove ourselves with this 16, then we're going to put together a financial plan to where we can begin to raise money from people that want to make a difference in our city, that just don't want to see it mishandled or misused in some way. We're putting our money in right now. Again, we're not loaning it, we're putting it in. We donate the money in this nonprofit with the intent to bring change. And myself, I'm retiring again in December, and this is going to be my full-time gig around here. And then I'll also pay attention to the mandate in Uganda. But we believe that we're going to see that needle curve. We've been doing resource rallies where we've been having 5 to 6 events a year in at-risk communities where we have police come out, not just as security, but with intention to play with the children, to interact with these kids, to interact with their parents. On the last one we had in Caddo Heights, I watched a police captain and a lieutenant, both females, that were in the middle of a gym floor dancing with the neighborhood women of Caddo Heights, having the best time of their life. They don't see each other as enemy. Yeah. And these kids, they get to see their law enforcement not as that somebody to be afraid of and run from, but they learn, this is my superhero, and this is somebody we want to run to. And those policemen, they don't just see these kids as problems. They love these kids. And you start talking to them about these kids, they'll well up on you real quick. They care about these children. And I think those are the types of changes that we need to have. And so we're addressing things to bring change. I've been excited. The chief of police has asked me to be part of his advisory committee. We've seen several things last year start, which I'm very excited about. One last year was they had the mental health court, which is many in the mental health industry have been trying to get for years. Yeah. And that hits because the rosters are full and you can't get a court date. So they take people with addiction and mental illness and they move them into a different courtroom so that they're not blocking the system. Okay. We now have the mobile crisis response unit. Again, Dr. Cox, my best friend and my co-chair in SU, he's heavily involved in getting that started, as many of us were in SU, and it's now being spearheaded by CADA, and I think the first of the year, I think Drum will be president of the board of CADA. So we're infiltrating the community at large, trying to make a difference. And our advisory team, we have 3 of us of the 5 board members are already on the committee 100 of top executives in the community. so that we may have influence with those who have influence. So we can see change. We have, many of them are being very excited. I've been approached by many of those in the Committee 100 saying, this is something that we can get behind. This is something, because they know we're fiscally responsible. They know that we're measuring what we're doing, and they know that we're putting our money where our mouth is. And none of us are taking a paycheck out of it.
Yeah, and there's no political objective.
There's no
objective
political.
Here. Yeah, so that calls for a whole other conversation where more people can take this matter serious than not.
Yes,
you know what I mean?
Yes. Right now, we have the support and verbally support and physical. They show up to our rallies. Our parish commissioners, you know. I mean, they come and they come to me and say, Mike, man, this is awesome. We appreciate so much and what you guys are doing. And, you know, they're seeing the value of it.
Yeah.
And it's snowballing. The city council, we presented to them, and they unanimously endorsed us, along with the mayor. And I don't know if the whole city council and mayor's office, everybody came together for one photograph before in history of Shreveport as they did with us that day. So, you know, everybody recognizes there's a problem. We're not here to throw rocks. We're not here to blame anybody. We're not here to assess and say this is because of this or this is because of that demographic or this geography. No, this is an environmental problem that has solvable riddles, and we're going to solve them one riddle at a time. And we're going to turn Shreveport around. And we expect to see the crime rate continue to drop. Our chief of police has just really, gone full head of steam supporting us. He has formed his own commission of people, support team. He's asked me part of it. I'm very honored to be part of his advisory team. They have started to put out cameras all over the city to where, you know, we're short 150 police officers. That's a real problem.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're short 150 officers, it's hard to catch all the criminals. Well, the mobile crisis response unit should be able to capture 25 to 30% of the 911 calls now, which leaves more time for policing and less time for chronic mental illness or addiction issues. Again, more police work. We're getting new officers to take care of the attrition, but we're still 150 short. But the crime rate is dropping like a stone. I mean, I don't want to jinx it or anything, but every time I'm in one of these meetings where, you know, 30, 40, 50% down over last year's reduction, which was down before the year.
Yeah.
So we're seeing multiplications now in the reduction of crime. In fact, we were seeing reductions in crime in Shreveport when the national average was not. Because we don't just look at Shreveport, we look at half the rest of the country. When I see the national average, you know, not dropping or even increasing, and we're dropping by in the tens of percentages at a time, that means our police department is doing a lot of things right. That means our sheriff's department is doing a lot of things right. That means we're united as a single front, as a unit of the city to address these issues in a way they've never been addressed. The mayor supports us. He endorses anything that we need endorsing on. He's shown up to some of our rallies. You know, his big push, along with city council and many of the commissioners, to clean up Shreveport has been a big win. I mean, if you live in a community where you have thousands of tons of garbage, of tires, in your yards, and dead animals and all these things, and we say, yes, you have value. Well, you know, these kids can't even go outside.
Yeah.
You know, and so if we create an environment where they see that we care enough to clean up the city, yes, they have value. And that's what our city leaders and fathers are trying to say. They have value. I'd like them all to get along a little better. You know, that's me and Drone's big deal. Drone is black, I'm white, you know. He was a military hero. I was not. You know, but we're both successful in business. We both overcame a lot of things. He overcame poverty, extreme poverty. He overcame barriers to race. He overcame speech impediments. He overcame academic challenges. 3 PhDs, you know, multiple Bronze Star recipient for heroism, other Bronze Stars for valor in different theaters of war. He's been in every battle from Black Hawk down forward to today. I want to be Jerome when I grow up. And he's a prime example, and I think every man does.
Yeah.
Every man does. He has served he serves in our military, injured, all the things that I know that he's gone through personally. Has a great wife, the wife of his youth, 4 sons, all of them are perfect. None's perfect, but I think they're pretty dang close. He considers me his best friend. And he's black, I'm white, he's Democrat, I'm Republican. That means, but one of the things we made a pledge as a CEO group, we're nothing. Because people tried to call me a while back and say, why don't you enter the world of politics?
Yeah.
I said, well, I'm not anything. I'm nothing. I'm just a guy that wants to work with everybody to make them successful.
Yeah.
So, we don't endorse anybody. People try to get us to endorse people. We don't endorse people. But the people who win, we are full-fledged supporting of them being successful. And, we critique policy, not people. And, and politics cannot play a part in this. This is common sense.
Well, yeah, that's always the issue. Politics always does. And then nothing gets done, or it does for 4 years or however long, and then it doesn't anymore.
Right.
You know?
And so when you look at our advisory team, it's a reflection of the community. It's black, white, all the neighborhoods, people from every background, rich, poor, the mothers that I've dealt with. I mean, there was a mother, it was shortly after we started thinking about the housing situation. I was in Queensboro. I was on Lakeshore Drive, and I was dressed like I am today. I had my sports jacket on. I look kind of professional. I'm white. I don't exactly fit in. I pull into a blight house, and I walk around back, and I'm looking at it, and I'm trying to size this piece of property up, thinking about buying some property so that we can begin to repair them. And I've got another plan to create an environment where we have affordable home ownership through private financing.
I'm really excited about all that. Like that,
Yeah.
I don't know what excites me. All of this excites me, but the most exciting for me is like creating these opportunities for these individuals to have a profession that they're good at, but then them turning around and using that
to make a difference in the world,
in the community,
and get paid and make a good living
in the community, and for them to be able to become homeowners themselves. So like that's the piece that I'm just like,
right.
I want to get full.
Chief Wayne Smith asked me when we were talking about it. He said, Mike, is it possible maybe even some of our young officers could qualify to own some of these homes, because we're not going to be selling them for big profits.
Yeah,
we're going to be renovating the blight, making it like new. In neighborhoods that have blight on the rise. We're going to be very selective about the houses and the streets that we're working on. We're going to use our student labor to work on them while they're learning, and then after 6 months we're going to pay the students that graduate to work on them and get pay raises based on how quick and excellent they become. And we're going to refurbish these houses. And then someone from the outside could say, hey, I'm wanting to make more than 2-3% interest on my money. I'd like to make 7.5% interest. We have the software we've already purchased for a mortgage company. We have CPA on standby, ready to oversee this, take care of the K1s. We're going to do collections through direct withdrawals, ACH, house payments, and we're going to take people who've never been able to qualify for a home before because they're either poor, they have problems with their credit, because poor people always have problems with their credit, doctor bills and things that just things that have hindered their ability. They might have lost a car before.
Yeah.
But the home, if they can get a home and that payment is the same as they can prove the last 2 years rent, they qualify. We want to do a background check, make sure that they don't have any pending things where they'll go to prison. But if they don't, and they do a drug test, make sure they're not hung on anything heavy, then we're going to send them to the Highland Center or United Way, one of these 2 nonprofits that are great nonprofits that will teach financial literacy and the value of home ownership. We outsource that, and they'll teach that, and then they'll qualify. These kids, they've worked hard, they have come from nothing, that are building these houses, will be the ones to present these moms with a key to their new home that they've never been able to afford before.
Yeah.
It's totally been out of their reach. We want these young men to understand the value of something bigger than themselves. And for them to experience the joy of that. And then some of them actually own some of these homes.
Yeah.
But to experience that, and then the investor, the guy out there with money, I'm going to put some money in it because I can make 7.5% on my money through this for-profit organization that's buying the house from SB Affordable Homes, which takes the profit from that and funds our school.
Yeah.
So it's a self-funded.
You're creating more sustainability.
Yeah.
And you're doing it from the outside in.
Yes.
And the inside out at the same time.
Yes. Yes, you got CEOs that have come together. How do we run a business that can make a profit that doesn't make a profit because it's funding other things that we need to do as a city?
Yeah.
And if people, even if they don't have an appetite for giving big money, they may have an appetite for making big interest.
Yeah.
And feel good that the house is, that the loan is secured against multiple properties and it's insured by insurance, that they are the payables.
Yeah.
And they're guaranteed their interest rate.
Yeah, you're getting it from every direction, the right way.
Right.
Like you're hitting it from every direction.
There's a need for interest on my income. There's a need for private finance for people who are not financeable. There's a need for jobs for young men while they're learning and growing, and there's a need for training opportunities to teach them. And then there's a need for mentors that will walk through life with them together. And there's beyond the school.
Yeah, and there's also need to clean up the city, and this is part of it.
And the city gets their blight cleaned up, and the neighborhoods become safer, and the crime rate goes down, and people want to move to Shreveport, and we have a better employable workforce for big companies who want to come to Shreveport, which will grow our city beyond what we have, beyond our capacity again, to where we can be an up and coming beacon that everybody in the world wants to be like. I believe, and I'm prophetically believe, that in the next 5-10 years, people are going to be coming from all over the country to see what happened to Shreveport, Louisiana. And you can't get me to believe anything different. I
mean, sounds great to me. I'm excited about it. I think, like I said, we've talked about this before, and I wanted you to lay this all out, but not just coming in pushing that, for people to understand where you come from. You know what I mean, and how you got there, and that this is not a
and
business
again, this
tactic.
isn't about Mike Riordan.
No, yeah.
This is about a sustainable path, and just like in the resource rallies in the beginning, me and Jerome, everybody were killing ourselves trying to get this done. We're all busy running 2 or 3 companies apiece, and we're making time for this stuff. And we're out there dying in the heat, and we're doing all this stuff, and we're giving away money, we're giving away bicycles, and we're giving away TV sets, and we're feeding hundreds of people at a time, enjoying every minute of it. And then we have an advisory board member that said, hey, I'd really like to be more involved. And now that individual's taking point on that entire operation. I mean, we mind that person now. We're just one of the team.
Yeah.
and there's somebody else taking that and owning that and doing a much better job than I ever did with it. And I expect that to happen the same in the schools. I expect that to happen in everything we're doing.
Well, this is very similar to what you've done in Uganda. You know what I mean?
In Mexico.
In Mexico, yeah.
Like, and crisis pregnancies.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's a different application because it's a different, objective, but still at the same time.
We fill a void that's needed to get the ball rolling. And I find that most people, once that ball is rolling, it's different than going and saying, hey, imagine this. Can you invest your money?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's impossible. One board member, before he became a board member, when I was sharing the vision with him, he looked at me. He's a well-established business in this town. He looked at me and he said, daunting. It was the only word he could say, daunting.
Yeah.
And little by little, we're taking control of all these situations. We now have a mobile response unit, crisis response unit, that we thought would be the last thing that we'd ever see in Shreveport. It's not that we did it. There was a lot of people that did it. But somebody had to be the tool pusher that was Geneva.
Yeah.
That didn't have a dog in that fight.
Yeah.
To rally everybody. And to us, that's what SCU is. We don't have a political agenda. We're not in competition with other nonprofits. We tell them we're not trying to steal resources or money from you. In fact, we want to know what you do so that we find what you do well. And as we take that big picture and we start filling in those holes, we see like a United Way, like the other people that are doing great things either in counseling or Volunteers for Youth Justice, unbelievable nonprofit, for them to be able to come alongside and fill that hole. We fill a gap that they needed desperately with these jobs, because we're affecting the pipeline.
Yeah.
Like I say, the big thing now is going to be trying to figure out the truancy issue, which that'll be the next big focus on our agenda. We can do a couple things at a time, but we will address it, and we will get with our leadership in the cattle pair schools. And
as this unfolds, dude, you'll have. I mean, it's just by design. You're going to have those children see this and see an opportunity and want to participate. And,
yes. And
you'll have a shift. Now, it might not happen overnight, but you will have one. It's
a gradual shift. But
yeah.
there is a temperature change in Shreveport today than there was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
You have when the chief of police stands up, he's giving us nothing but good statistics. And he's very proud of his team and our police force, and so are we, because they deserve it. Those guys put their lives on the line. They're servants every day. You got the people at 911 are working collaboratively with the police and with LSU Medical Center and CADA and all these mental health and all these addiction people. They're working like an orchestra right now. And it's amazing. Jerome always quotes his mom, but we know some of that's quoted from previous presidents even. But it's amazing what you can get accomplished if it doesn't matter who gets credit for it.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yes. And so honestly, there's nothing that we've done by ourselves that would have accomplished anything. It literally took all the volunteers. It took all those who are giving up their time, even if they don't have money. They're showing up. They're ministering to the people in these neighborhoods. These nonprofits show up in bulk and offer their services in one place where these people can walk to it. It's just been amazing. Yeah. I'm so glad we've done this, and we're just getting started.
Well, I'm excited.
I am too.
Is there anything else you want to put out there before we shut this thing down?
Yeah, if you're listening in Shreveport Bossier and you're interested in following SCU, Shreveport Citizens United, we're not slighting Bossier, but we know that the violence and the crime epidemic that Bossier is experiencing and everybody else, a lot of it is happening in our at-risk neighborhoods in Shreveport. So we focused a laser in the beginning on that area. The SB Handyman Vocational Training has a B on it for a reason, and the SB Affordable Homes has a B on it for a reason. So if you want to be a part, go to Shreve, SHREVE, CU, alphabet CU.org, and register, and you'll begin to get our updates and emails as we have things happening. We'll keep you abreast of it. We'll be sending out newsletters. In fact, I'm planning on having a citywide letter go out to every home and recipient of Shreveport, outlining all the positive things that are happening in the community and some things that are on the horizon that people could look forward to and celebrate. Don't let our divided politics and all that kind of stuff get you down. Shreveport has got a bright future, and we're going to grab it, and we're going to hold on, and you're going to see a lot of growth in the future, and that crime rate's going to drop like a stone.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for your time. I appreciate it.